Good afternoon and welcome to the first in a series of webinars brought to you by Volta Trucks, exploring the decarbonisation of transport fleets, the benefits that this can bring to your business, discussing the options and of course the barriers and solutions that are available. For those that may not know, Volta Trucks is a scale-up, full electric HGV manufacturer and truck as a service provider. The flagship 16-ton Volta Zero revolutionises urban logistics, bringing sustainable zero tailpipe emission transport, improving safety and air quality in our towns and cities. In today's webinar, we are going to be talking about where to begin in electrifying commercial fleets. I'm Rob Gwynn, Policy and Public Affairs Manager for the UK at Volta Trucks, and I am joined today by Neil Chamberlain, Volta's Head of Sales Operations. Hello, Neil.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for the invite. First one.
Absolutely. So Neil has over 15 years experience in the automotive sector, spanning project management, fleet supply, fleet management, and prior to joining Volta, he was responsible for the transformational program of moving 3.5 cars and light commercial vehicles to low and zero emission alternatives for a multinational energy company. Got that right?
You have, yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks.
So before we dive into the conversation, just a little bit of housekeeping. If there are any questions that you would like to be answered, then please do submit them through the Q&A section of the Zoom link. And if there are any questions in the chat that you would also like to ask, then please use the voting buttons so that we can prioritise these, and the more votes they get, the more likelihood we're going to ask them out. And we will come on to questions at the end of the session. So the session is going to run for an hour. We will have a conversation, Neil and I, going through some of the questions for the first 45 minutes or so, and then we will come to the Q&A for the last 15 minutes. So, Neil, I'd really like to start with probably the biggest, the second biggest question first, actually, that being the why. So why should businesses begin to decarbonise their fleets, and why is electrification the answer for urban environments specifically?
I think we're all in that place, aren't we, Rob, where we know that climate change is happening. It's all around us. We feel that on a day-to-day basis. So everything we can do as an organisation, as a population, as a society, to remove any forms of carbon emissions from our streets is a great place for us to start. So if you just think about that one factor, and I think you've got some great stats that you picked up from a conversation you had previously.
Absolutely. So we know that poor air quality is a big health issue, especially in London and other cities. And there's an Imperial College London study that shows that over 4,000 people died because of the impact of poor air in 2019. And of course, we've had the introduction of clean air zones, low emission zones, and ULEZ specifically for London. And these have contributed to a 44% reduction in roadside nitrogen oxide levels since 2019. So that's a pretty big as to why businesses should look at doing this.
Totally agree. And that one stat, that's the reason why electrification in an urban environment really works so well. That reduction in all of those particular emissions, it just helps our health and safety going forward. But if we think about other things like the sustainability, the CSR aspects of an organisation, they just match to everything that, for example, an organisation like Volta are aiming to achieve. And then if you start adding other bits on top, such as the expansion of ULEZ zones, clean air zones, as we go around, specifically in the UK, we just know the number that are lined up to come along. So it just makes good sense from both a commercial aspect, from a brand image, all the way through to that massive climate change issue and fight that we've all got on our hands.
So we're going to come on to the commercial aspects of this, but I suppose there's the regulatory landscape as to why as well. As we've mentioned, the clean air zones, we know that those are only going to get further and more stringent, and the impact of those is going to become more. But in terms of fleet operators and decarbonising their operations, the fleet aspect obviously makes up their biggest emitter, and is therefore the biggest challenge for them to decarbonise, or is it the biggest opportunity for them to decarbonise?
I think it's a good challenge, and I think it depends on the organisation or the or what the that company actually does. Is it a manufacturing organisation? Is it a logistics organisation? Logistics organisations, 100%. That's their biggest emissions or biggest area of emission of CO2. So if you can think about how you reduce that. And it's not just about migrating your fleet across, obviously, to zero emissions. It's about thinking about, can you reduce the number of journeys you're taking? The number of journeys you take, if you reduce those, then actually, especially in an urban environment, the less vehicles we put into a city, the safer those cities are. And again, going back to helping out the health and safety aspects of urban environments, it works really well from that side of things as well.
And I suppose there's a congestion point there as well, isn't there, in terms of being able to reduce the number of vehicles on the road. But look, we touched on it a little bit, but I suppose now let's really come on to the commercial benefits of having electric vehicles in fleets and what this means for fleet managers. You've been in that experience, you've lived that. And so you've got really good insight into the kind of questions that fleet managers are going to have, but also the commercial benefits that it can bring. So from your experience and obviously the work that you're now involved with customers, what are those commercial advantages?
The place we always start with then on these kind of conversations is really about what the cost advantage is for doing it. We'll touch, I think, later on just around the overall TCO costs and how we can help to mitigate those going forward. But actually, if you're thinking, or when we start to think about the uptime of a vehicle, most electric vehicles, or all electric vehicles, should I say, have less moving parts. So therefore, actually, they're easier to maintain. Should be easier to maintain. There's less downtime, so you get lots of good advantages from just being able to utilise that vehicle more often. So you should be, we talk about our uptimes between 95 and 98%. That's amazing compared to what a combustion engine vehicle would be able to do. So if you're thinking about that, and energy costs as well. So we know that fuel costs are rising, energy costs are rising, but there's still a disparity between those two. There's still a decent enough gap that says when you drive the mileage, and especially if you're a logistics company utilising the trucks, those ranges and distances that you travel, that's a good chunk of difference between the diesel costs and what energy costs would be. Lots of when I was a fleet manager, a lot of the time we would look at tenders and new business opportunities coming in. Lots of those now have that a really big weighting on how you as an organisation are doing decarbonising your own fleet operations, for example. So that's another great opportunity to sit there and say, well, actually, look, from our side of things, we decarbonise by moving to a fully electric fleet, or as progressing towards that fully electric fleet. Highlighting that journey gets you those extra marks in that tender opportunity.
So not only can operators take the benefits of switching to electric vehicles because the running costs are lower than traditional ICE vehicles, but this could be an opportunity to win new business on the back of that as pressure from their own customers comes on decarbonising their supply chains and taking the whole emissions throughout the supply chain into account.
100%, and actually when you take that one step further, and actually from a, let's say, from a logistics company perspective, then the customer of that logistics company are then starting to push and potentially that might be let's say it's a retailer, but actually the customer of the retailer is also pushing. So where it stops down your supply chain is getting further and further away, and lots of that kind of pressure needs to kind of filter back up. And so therefore decarbonising your fleet could potentially drive more income from your end customer, as well as those cost savings that we talked about from uptime, fuel savings, ULEZ and all that sort of stuff.
Just coming on to kind of the energy and fuel savings, we know that long-term trajectory of the finite resource that is oil, and therefore diesel, is only going to go one way, with obviously blips inside. Yeah. We're experiencing higher energy costs at the moment because of external geopolitical factors. But I think we can all agree that actually, as renewables and energy security comes online a little bit more, that actually those energy costs are going to come down for electricity, and therefore that's going to just make the business case even easier. 100%,
and as we can see, with lots of different things that are coming out into the news. We talked about earlier on when we were having a coffee at the machine. we talked about the announcement from National Grid about trying to get everybody to reduce their use around that peak time.
Yeah.
But actually, that they're building that infrastructure and the network to allow us to get to a place where more energy is available. There's already kind of domestic tariffs out there for people who charge overnight their electric vehicles, or even if they use their washing machines, dishwashers, and that sort of stuff overnight. I can only see that coming from a business perspective as well.
Some more commercial tariffs looking at business users.
Absolutely, and I think this is a good opportunity for businesses, especially because we've got a lot of energy use, right? Yeah. So us being able to go and sit with our energy providers and have those discussions, it's almost the equivalent in my old days of being kind of a fleet manager, thinking about going out and getting that bulk diesel deal. If I can go out there and purchase or actually tell an energy company how much energy I'm going to use, that's got to be worth something from their side of things as well.
So the scale upon which opportunities are arising out of this are quite vast, yeah.
I think so, yeah, and the landscape changing on a daily basis, so it's really exciting time.
And so I suppose we now probably come to, and I started off with the second biggest question. Now, when I come to the biggest question of how. So, as a former fleet manager and now head of sales for Volta, what are the first steps that a company should take if they're interested in purchasing electric vehicles, going on that transition? Do they look at the vehicles that are available? Do they look at some of the charging infrastructure requirements? Do they assess their own power supplies? Or do they just sit and wait and see what their competitors do and then follow suit? What would your advice be?
Firstly, I'd like to say thanks for the job promotion there. You've moved me up to head of sales operations at the moment, but I like it. So in terms of there's no single answer, and you've pretty much kind of touched on the area. So when in previous jobs, when we've been looking at from a fleet manager's perspective, what do I need to think about? For me, it boils down to three key strategic pillars. So the first one is the product. So we're talking about the vehicles. What vehicles are available? What vehicles out there match your use case? Or what use cases can you use those vehicles for? So it's a slightly different way of thinking about it. And probably where we are at the moment, especially in the HGV environment, it's almost about sitting there and going, what products are out there and how could I utilize those in my environment today? So all of those different types of use cases, and I think one of those bits where you start to go, okay, so how many duty cycles, what sleep time, how much rest does the vehicle have? Is it depot to depot? Is it depot out to another depot? All of that sort of stuff, and you can build all of that around those products, and then you start to obviously look at things like the payload, the weight, the range, all of those elements, and you build yourself a nice kind of understanding of what's in the market, what's against your use case, and then actually what do you do to match those two together. The next bit is all around infrastructure. How do I fuel that vehicle? How do I make sure that every morning when I wake up, my driver arrives, opens the door, he's got enough range in that vehicle to manage his day. So thinking about the different types of chargers that are available, is it an AC charger? So is it a little bit slower, trickle feed overnight? Do I need a DC charger? Do I actually need to invest in the cost? Because there's quite a disparity in the cost between an AC and a DC charger. So do I need a DC charger? Because actually my duty cycle means that my vehicle goes out twice a day. So I have to bring it back in, I have to charge it and let it go back out. The key thing for me has always been people. How do I persuade someone that's been driving a diesel truck for X number of years that electric's the new way forward? And actually it's a better journey, it's a better environment to operate in. And without this being the full sales pitch from Volta's perspective, but that's what we thought about right back at the very start. Our founder, Carl Magnus, he sat there and just thought about that whole area of the driver's fatigue, how easy it is to drive the vehicle, and anyone that's driven even an electric car, moving from a combustion car to an electric car, and I'm a massive advocate, I drive electric, but you sit there and the fatigue level just drops down. So actually we know that we can get a better demographic into the vehicle, because it's just a different environment. It's just a different place to work. It's not seen and felt as a dirty diesel anymore. And then the other bit is just around that. Is around training. So there is training. It's about building confidence in essence, right? Yeah, I use a great anecdote, and I've used this, and anyone that's kind of seen me on a webinar before will be probably bored of me saying this, but when my son first learned to drive at the age of 17, he rang me one time and he said, "Dad, I need to go and put fuel in the car. Can you come and help me?" And I was just like, "Yeah, of course I can." I thought that, you know, he was just being a bit cheeky and he just wanted me to pay for the fuel. But actually, the reality is, he arrived at the fuel pump and was just like, they teach me how to drive, but they don't teach me how to fuel. So it's a confidence thing, and if we can train our drivers and train the drivers that we're operating with that electric is the right way forward, and so on and so forth, and actually how to charge, that there is no worries. You can plug it in when it's raining, you can plug it in when there's a lightning storm, all of that sort of stuff. You know, it's it makes life easier.
And I suppose the benefits, just touching on that driver training bit, are more tangible for an electric vehicle in terms of driving it correctly to ensure that you're reaping all the benefits from regen braking, getting extended range, that are probably more than what they would be in a comparable ICE vehicle.
So I'd probably challenge that a little bit, and the only reason I'd say that is because fleet managers for years, we've all been utilising telemetry, if the telemetry is in the truck, to manage driver behaviour, because we all know that if we manage our driver behaviour, they don't speed, they don't accelerate, take corners at the right speed, then we get a better MPG or kilometres per 100 per litre, sorry, out of the truck. So we've always been trying to encourage them to drive in a better way. So it's thinking about it in a slightly different way.
Okay.
But that driver behaviour piece is key, and it'll always be key. It's always key for every fleet manager. But
so I suppose we've kind of touched on those three pillars, but now Volta offers a truck as a service. So you're talking to early adopted customers and beginning that journey with them. What's the very first thing that the truck as a service offers, goes in and does when a customer says, "I'm interested in doing this"? What's the first thing that they do?
So once we've established that that our product is the right type of product, then you're absolutely right. We utilise our truck as a service colleagues to go in and do a site assessment or a site readiness report. So we go out and try and understand what the site capacity is. So what spare capacity is there going into the site? Because this then starts to build up how long it's going to take us to install that infrastructure, what the requirement is, the costs, and we get to a really good kind of understanding, and then we can sit with the customer and really try and help them. So going back to those three pillars, it's about creating a journey, right? It's about us knowing where we're going to start and where we're going to end. The task solution that we offer, Truck as a Service, helps to identify all of those individual steps that we need to deliver that allows us to get from that start point to having the confidence in delivering that vehicle.
So I suppose from a fleet operator's perspective, then, we're given that there are those three pillars and there are those various elements that to take into consideration. Having a service offering such as TAS actually takes the pinch points away from operators to be able to say, actually, this is the journey, you're going to take us through it, and really be that.
Absolutely. It really gets us to a place where any of those questions, we have the expertise to be able to go and answer those questions, or to at least help a fleet manager, fleet operator, all the way up to the procurement guys, CEOs, to understand what needs to happen, those steps, and we can give them some really good expert advice, because we've done this multiple times now with our existing customer base.
So would your advice to operators be to look at this sooner rather than later, given everything we've spoken about, given the different elements? Would your advice be for operators to start investigating it and seeing as feasible it is for their operation now, rather than waiting for regulations to change or for competitors and things to start looking at it?
I think so the competitor bit is always that piece where you sit there and say, so it takes us back to the new business piece we talked about earlier on. You know, if if you're that company that has the electric opportunity or electric option, should I say, then potentially you're going to get a little bit more business based on that CSR versus dirty diesel at the moment. Yep. For me though, the bit about starting sooner rather than later is, and this kind of drops back into your word a little bit, you know, subsidies. Yep. Subsidies won't be there forever, and we see that with the plug-in car grant. You know, it was there, it was great. Everyone was going out and you know, getting £3.5 grand for their car, and it just kept going down and down, and now it's not there. So the sooner you start, the sooner, you know, the more of that subsidy is available for you, which helps to drive down that cost and helps you to get your TCO parity sooner than where you might go in the future. But thinking about charging infrastructure, and this is the bit that really takes the time. If you're kind of in a brand new business park and you've kind of, you know, just purchased or just leased a brand new warehouse, the likelihood is the spare capacity going in there, because we you know, the government have been incentivizing people to kind of make sure that those buildings are available and have the right kind of
future-proof.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you're in a legacy warehouse, then actually in the middle of a legacy business park, that substation has only got so much spare capacity. You almost want to get in there first and grab that spare capacity before your competitor does, or the guy down the road does, because the next time when they need it, we're in a place where all of a sudden it's kind of it's much more expensive because it's an upgrade on the substation, or it's an additional substation that needs to be put in there. So not only is the cost there, actually the time is there as well. Everyone's trying to electrify at the moment, as we all know. So what that means is actually there's a shortage in subcontractors, electrical engineers, and people that are able to go out and actually do that installation for you. Now, one of the things that we do as well as part of our Truck as a Service is offer that. So we have a partnership with Siemens that enables us to go out and deliver a turnkey solution utilizing that partnership. So in essence, we're out there. We already have that partnership ready. So if you want us to help you install that charging infrastructure, we might well be that one, maybe two steps ahead of where it would be if you went out on your own.
And that's all in an ambition to take away as many of the hesitancies or the barriers that operators may face to do this.
It's about removing blockers, right? And just helping people to not only understand and for us to help educate and really be that consultant to help people go forward. But yeah, it's a blocker. It's an uncertainty. If I go back to my days of being a fleet manager and somebody had said to me, Neil, you need to go out and electrify our depots, you'd sit there, you know, and well, to be honest, that's what a previous procurement manager did. He kind of stuck a post-it note on my desk almost, you know, not necessarily literally, but just, you know, kind of convert the fleet to electric. You know, it just helps to alleviate some of those concerns and some of those worries.
So we've spoken around electrification being right in the urban environment, but let's go into that a little bit more. What environments do we think are most suited to electrification right now within that? And of course, we need to talk about the range that's required, potential payloads that's required. So what are you hearing from customers, and what are we advocating for in terms of the right environment and the right user case that we touched upon?
It's interesting. So if I was still back in my old days of thinking about vans up to, you know, 3.5 tons, then you're almost in that place of going, do you know what the use case is? As long as I can get it out to to a customer, yeah, then that's great, because I'll try and find a charge point on the way back. Now that's not always easy to kind of establish, because most of our public charge points are designed for cars, and they're in retail parks, and yeah, sometimes you don't necessarily want to see your branded van sitting outside of a McDonald's and you know, half hanging over and blocking the road, so that actually the drive-in or the drive-through isn't available. Yeah. Not that I've experienced that, Rob. Just put it out there. But yeah, so there's a lot of difference in that LCV. From a HGV perspective, we're probably still in that position where it's depot to depot at the moment, or return to base. because that's the only way that we can really charge. Now, there's some great organisations out there that are looking to build hubs that are commercial based hubs, but they're not with us at the moment. There's lots of other manufacturers and kind of Innovate UK projects that are going on that are looking to put concertinas and things like that, so that we can kind of drive down a motorway or actually kind of embed it into the road. All of that great stuff, but we're not there yet. So the use case for us at the moment, my personal opinion, and what we talk to lots of our customers about, is that depot to depot. Lots of the time, it's kind of there might be a short head journey, so taking from the depot into a city, delivering within the city, and then driving back. So that's what we talk about at the moment, and why that urban piece and where our truck works really well in an urban environment is really kind of the great use case at the moment.
So the electrification has the benefits because the distances these vehicles are travelling, the ranges of electric vehicles are suitable for those urban environments, and the charging infrastructure, albeit challenging, the solution to that is the depot charging bit rather than the public charging bit.
At this moment,
public charging will get there potentially. We've already alluded to some of the commercial entities that are coming around developing electric forecourts, and there's some great ones for cars currently available and vans, and they're slowly starting to shift into those commercial vehicle ones. But of course, space is a premium in the urban environment, so we know that actually back to base charging is key, and that comes back into having products that are available, vehicle options that are available for operators to choose from now, and then the easiest way to get those vehicles actually being used is the back to base depot charging model, that really can make the biggest impact straight away in terms of decarbonisation.
Absolutely, and just you kind of mentioned urban earlier on. The other reason why electric works really well in an urban environment for those HGVs at the moment is the range. So you can't actually drive that far, right? In central London, how far can you drive in an hour, in 2 hours? And then you add the tacho limits for drivers on top of that. So I wish I knew the stat totally off the top of my head, but you probably get to a stage where on an average day it's between 80 and 100 miles that the HGV is driving within a city environment, just because that stop-start type of area, and then obviously they go to wherever they need, and then they drop off. So there's time there, all of that great stuff, and this is another consideration that from a charging perspective, and some of our customers have started to talk to us about this, and in the fact that when they go to a retail park or a shop retail kind of area, then lots of those already have the power sockets that are sitting on the outside of the wall. So to a certain extent, all you need is something that will plug into a 32 amp socket and then plug into your truck. If you can do that, then while that vehicle's being unloaded, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, you're not going to top it up, right? You're not going to get there, but you're going to get another 5, 10, 15 miles. That could be the time that it takes you to get to your next drop. So you get to the next drop, you charge again. And then the actual cost of just putting a simple 32 amp socket on the outside of your premises is a lot cheaper than you probably would think.
So it's just like utilising that loading time or unloading time to be able to recharge. And then that's back to base is for the full recharge to leave on the morning fully charged, but it's base charging, depot charging at customers, clients, premises as well.
There's a great and again, I wish I knew who or where I'd heard it, but someone once said to me that for electric vehicles, you should charge when you stop. You shouldn't stop to charge. And if you have that as kind of a thought process in the back of your mind, you get to the stage that sits there and says, when I'm loading or unloading, vehicle stopped. Do I have an opportunity to charge at that point?
So we've spoken a little bit about charging infrastructure, but there will be people on the webinar wanting to go into that a little bit more around, you spoke about AC and DC and the differences that there are there. How does that kind of translate into the requirements that operators may have? And I know it kind of fits into whatever their operating model is and therefore the times that vehicles have. But are we finding that there's an average speed of charger, type of charger that is going to be more prevalent, or does it really depend?
So I'd suggest it depends on lots and lots of different factors. So the ability for what the speed of the going back to it, the product, the vehicle. So what's the minimum and maximum speed of the vehicle? So you think about the Volta Zero, the 16 ton. We have a minimum speed is 22 kilowatts, three-phase. So you need to install that 22 kilowatt three-phase charger to allow us to charge the Volta Zero 8 to 10 hours, depending on kind of what the starting point is and where you need it to get to. Yeah. The Volta Zero goes up to 150 kilowatts, and between 20 and 80% takes between about 45 minutes to an hour. So you sit there and go, that's the kind of the starting point, I guess, that you overlay. You sit there and say, what's my sleep cycle? Where does that truck stay overnight? So back to the depot. If it's there for 8 to 10 hours, 22 kilowatt chargers, absolutely ideal. If you have that dual duty cycle that we mentioned earlier on, then to a certain extent you're in that place that says, well, actually at this point I now need to think of those higher speed chargers. So is it a 150 kilowatt charger required? So that's only for an hour, but then you've got the operational bit that says, well, if I have 3 trucks that need to be charged in a 3-hour window, how do I make sure that somebody's moving that truck around so that it's not sitting idle in a bay? Because when you think about that 150 kilowatt charger, really, really expensive. You want to maximize the utilization of that. So a truck sitting there at an 80% charge, because that's probably the best level to charge it up to on a fast charger, about 80%. You sit there and go, I need to move it then, so I can get the next one in and utilize the.
So that comes back to the fleet manager training and elements that they need to kind of consider when looking at.
Absolutely. And one of the great places to really start to understand a lot more about this would be the telematics. That telematics tells you day by day how far that vehicle's driving, where it's stopping, how long it stops for, what its idle times are, what its loading times are, up and down about if you think up and down the tail lift. I don't know where I'm going with this. So how many times the tail lift's deployed? If it's a refridge, how many times the doors are opened and that sort of stuff. And that all kind of builds up to a picture of what your energy consumption would need to be from that side of things. And
so then we get away from this notion that you have to plug in and it has to be fully charged before it can go, because of the telematics data that is provided and that fleet operators have. They know exactly then to be able to really utilize these vehicles to the best of their ability. Absolutely. That actually this vehicle doing this route needs 75% charge, therefore actually I'm not going to leave it on there until it gets 80 or even more, and allows them to really be creative around how they use these vehicles.
Yeah, so a couple of different ways of doing that. There's smart chargers. So we can utilize, and Siemens offer a smart charger solution. So we can sit there and go, yes, charge to 85% on truck 1, which is great. And actually, because we know, back to your point, the telematics says that truck 1 will do a 30-mile, 40-mile journey the following day. So actually, you might decide that actually you don't even need to charge that truck for it's once every other day that truck gets charged. Or actually you sit there and go, well, I only need to charge 25% because that's the range it needs. Now there's lots and lots of different kind of ways you can build that up into a picture. And one of the things that we can that we do in Volta is we look at all of that data and we try and analyze that and then come back with almost a green, amber and red kind of traffic light system. So we look at your fleet and we say, right, of the 10 trucks that you've got, we can see that 3 do on an average daily mileage less than 100 miles, 80 miles, whatever it might be, depending on what type of truck it is, what the load is, and so on and so forth. The next chunk, the ambers, actually we can have a conversation about what the operational use case of those could be. So if we've got five trucks sitting in there, actually, maybe it's because on one day or a couple of days in that month, that vehicle does 400 miles in a day. Actually, that's never going to work for an electric vehicle, as we talked about earlier on.
Yeah.
But could you then actually that long range journey? Could you move that to a different truck, which therefore takes it out of that one, and therefore that allows that to kind of be move across into being available to be electrified. Yeah. So all of that sort of stuff, and it's not just Volta that do that. Other OEMs do that. A lot of the telematics companies help you with that EV availability, and it's probably a really useful place to start, because what that actually does is that all feeds into the number, the types, and of chargers that you need, and the locations for them as well.
So we've spoken about how the fleet managers can begin to look at this and looking at product availability, what their needs are, the routes that they're doing, infrastructure requirements, etc. Would you suggest that fleets, having done that, then kind of go with a big bang and electrify, whole fleets in one go, or what would you advocate in terms of the best way of doing this? To do one or two, or to do 50 or 60% of the fleet, for example?
I'll put my head of sales hat back on. Electrify everything now. Just give me a call and we'll electrify it. No, in all seriousness, it's my recommendation and what I've learned from the past is take it steady. Get some vehicles in on those routes that are within its range payload, and you're really comfortable in doing it. Get your drivers trained up, get them used to driving an electric vehicle. Subtly different, doesn't matter which OEM, it's just subtly different in driving it. So get lots of training, and actually to a certain extent what you're doing within your organization is building a group of people that are advocates for electric vehicles. Going back to what's the hardest bit of, for me personally, my opinion, what's the hardest bit of electrification? It's changing people. So if you've got this group of advocates who are almost sitting there in a canteen at the end of the day, over a cup of tea, and they're having that conversation and going, do you know what? I used to have sore knees, I used to have sore hips, all of that sort of stuff. I don't get that anymore because I'm driving a kind of an electric vehicle instead.
And we've seen that anecdotally from other sectors within transport that have electrified. I'm thinking specifically of London taxis, and the feedback from taxi drivers that have gone electric is that they're now the biggest advocates for it. And some are even questioning why it took them so long to switch. Yeah. Are we expecting that to be the same for HGV drivers?
I would. So I'd love to think that that's absolutely what happens. I found that with van drivers, and they almost start to get a little bit of competition in there. So when you think about the miles you drive per kilowatt hour on the or the kilometers you drive per kilowatt hour, you kind of start to hear when I'm walking outside or just chatting to some of the van drivers, they all sit there and go, I managed to get 3.2 today, Neil, and you just sit there and go, it must be the most random conversation that people, if they're walking by.
It's that competitive nature that
absolutely, and it just starts to kind of drive a little bit of competition, and rightly or wrongly, that helps to just drive that advocacy, and I would love to start to see that in the trucking industry. What I'd like to see as well is it's one of the things that we talk about internally is just the change in demographic as well.
Yeah, actually,
can we get more younger people in? I think the stat was almost, or the stat in the UK is something like the average age of a truck driver is mid to late 50s, and you sit there and go, well, that's great, but in 10 years' time, all of the stuff that needs to be moved in trucks isn't going to be there unless we incentivize or kind of get the right environment for younger people to come and join that industry.
Correct, and we know that the sector is already struggling from a driver shortage perspective. Absolutely. And I suppose the future and the electrification and the opportunities that brings, certainly when you look at a vehicle like the Volta Zero, can really be used as a catalyst to attract not only younger people in, but also make the industry more professional and appear on the outside to be the profession that it actually is, but also look at creating change in the diversity that currently is not really existing in HGV drivers, but could be because of the attractive nature this might bring.
100%, and going back to we talked really briefly about it earlier on, but just the environment that you get from an electric vehicle and from an electric truck, it's just a nicer, more pleasant environment. If you then kind of take that to the next level of the Volta, and just by removing all of the clutter. So everything's just down to, in essence, 3 screens. You control everything just from right in front of you. Eye fatigue gets reduced. all of that great stuff. It's just a nicer environment to work in.
And just taking that step forward before we move on, because we haven't yet spoken about potentially the biggest barrier, but by that central driving position creates less stress because the driver has more visibility around the areas that the roads that they're on, makes them feel closer to it, and therefore that takes some of the stress and the worry out because they have so much more visibility. That actually means that they're more kind of involved with their environment as opposed to being a lot higher, having to use mirrors an awful lot and you know, move around the cab to actually try and see. It all feeds into that nicer environment that we're creating.
I totally agree. And again, it's more relaxing, you know, because the Volta Zero uses a camera system. Actually, you know, we have a 360-degree bird's eye view, which pretty much means you can potentially be sitting there at traffic lights, cyclists all around you, but you can have a look at that 360-degree view and you can see where those cyclists are based on your road position. So actually, you don't need to your point, be moving backwards and forwards to try and see if you have a cyclist down the inside of you before you make that left turn. You already know because you've looked at the camera and the cameras are helping you as a driver to be more comfortable, more confident in the manoeuvres that you're making.
Of course, we've spoken about electrification being the key for the urban environment. That goes to the heart of urban driving. Absolutely, I
totally agree.
So coming on to probably one of the biggest barriers that we've been hearing about in moving to electric fleets, certainly in trucks, we know that there is an additional cost in comparison to traditional ICE vehicles. What can be done about this and what support is there available? And this is a conversation that you and I have had previously. And then linked into that, how can fleet managers justify that extra spend? We've spoken about the commercial advantages that may come from that, but what about more of the operational day-to-day running costs? And we have to always remember this and remember the backdrop that these are commercial vehicles. They have to be there working for the businesses and generating money for them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And one of the bits that we work a lot on, and you'll know because you have input into it, is that the total cost of ownership model.
Yeah.
Now, yes, the initial outlay of any electric vehicle is more expensive, but we see, and this is no doubt what we'll see as we progress forward. We see in cars and in vans that price parity is getting closer and closer to between the combustion engine and the electric vehicle, and that's just because more vehicles are being produced, the technology improves, therefore actually it gets cheaper and cheaper to produce it, as you can well imagine. So yes, there is an additional outlay, absolutely, on an electric vehicle, electric truck. The difference is that actually what you can do is by thinking about financing instead of potentially doing a capex, you can extend that lease period out. Why can you extend the lease period out? Let's go all the way back. Less moving parts, therefore there's less bits to go wrong. We know that the longevity of that electric vehicle will be there in 6, 7, 8 years time. We have the kind of the technology that sits in lots of the electric vehicles. Same with our competitors. It's almost like a software kind of base now, isn't it? You know, there's so many sensors on it that preventative and predictive maintenance is part and parcel of what we do in Volta and what our competitors will also do. So we're comfortable in saying to our customers, you can keep these vehicles for longer. The longer you keep it, the quicker you get back to, or the easier it is to get back to that cost parity. Yeah. We've mentioned the subsidies element of it before. Yeah. We've talked about you know, thinking about making sure that you include everything into that TCO model. So what are the ULEZ charges? What are the clean air zone charges that get added on top of that? And other levies that no doubt will start to grow and come into it. And those operational costs are really important to include in that, because they can sometimes be forgotten when you're just looking at, say, the capex purchase of a vehicle as opposed to the life that you'll have the vehicle, the absolutely you'll have it. And of course, we know that electric vehicles are currently exempt from things like the congestion charge zone. They are not captured by any of the low emissions because they don't have any tailpipe emissions. We also know that regulation is probably going to be looking at increasing those costs or increasing the standards that are required for that. And we spoke about public funding available. There are schemes in the UK. The plug-in truck grant is available in the UK to assist with operators in making that transition. So all of these then do feed into the
TCO calculations, and as part of our service, we provide that to operators to give them a complete picture of what
Absolutely.
it is.
Yeah, so we have the ability to sit with any of our customers or prospective customers, take their data from what happens today, put that into a TCO calculation, and then come back and give them that TCO parity. So how many years further down the line will we hit that TCO parity? And that really kind of helps us to get to a good place. But sometimes you have to almost take a little bit of a step back. And I spoke to a customer quite recently who was only interested in 7.5 ton trucks.
Okay.
Because from a maneuverability perspective,
yeah,
7.5 ton is perceived to be more maneuverable than a 16 ton. We took him out for a test drive in the 16 ton Volta, and the maneuverability of the 16 ton Volta is quite amazing. We went to the Millbrook. We were there. We went to Millbrook last week, and one part of the Millbrook circuit is it's called the Inner City Centre.
Yeah.
Previously, anything over 3.5 tons has been not allowed to go in there. We managed to demonstrate to the USAC guys that we could drive our 16 ton Volta around that circuit. So potentially, the mindset change for this customer was, I don't need to buy 2 7.5 tons. I can buy one 16 ton truck. So what does that do? That goes all the way back to actually the TCO model works.
Yeah.
Our ultimate piece of making the urban environment safer. So we've got one truck on the road instead of 2 now.
Yeah.
So therefore the emissions come down, and actually we get to a really good place of being able to do something in a different way. And for me, electrification gives you that opportunity to just, as a fleet manager, take a step back and go, actually, how could I do that differently? Let me not just kind of follow down the route that I've always thought about before. Let me think about things in a slightly different way.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a great opportunity now for us to actually start going to some questions that our audience have been putting in. We have a question here. So I already have charging points installed at my depot for passenger cars and light commercial vehicles. Can these be used to charge a Volta Zero?
So quite simply, my answer to that is it depends. So if they are a 22 kilowatt 3-phase charger, then yes. If they're less than that, then no. But what that does mean is that we, part of this site assessment, site readiness conversation that we had before, our team of experts could come out and actually have a look to see whether it's as simple as just removing the, a 7 or an 11 kilowatt charger from the top, because the cabling is able to support it, all of that sort of stuff. But so we could come and offer that kind of guidance. Again, we're not the only people that could do this, right?
But it's a good question to ask, because actually it then gives the understanding around what might be there in terms of infrastructure, and it might be a simple case which is therefore much cheaper to just upgrade the charging unit as opposed to having to do the
absolutely. And part of the site assessment work that our truck as a service guys do is they don't just look at what might be installed from a Volta perspective today. They ask the questions about what's your future plans?
Yeah.
Is it for LCVs for cars, but also for starting to think about if you're going for the full decarbonisation, then actually if you've got diesel or gas powered forklifts inside at the moment, and you want to transition across to electric forklifts as well, then actually all of that kind of gives you a plan and a journey. And we talked about that journey before. You don't do everything on day one, but actually understanding what's there in the future. And potentially what it means as well is that you dig the car park up once, we lay the infrastructure or the trunking, and we can help to just future-proof that depot.
Perfect. So how do you depreciate your brand new truck over the years of TAS?
It's a really great question, and I would like to say that we'll come back and give them the full information on that. And the only reason I say that is because I'm not the TAS financing expert. So we'll take that question away and come back and be able to give everyone on the list I wouldn't like to say the wrong thing at this.
No, absolutely. And of course, it's unique to the operations around how many trucks they're going to be having and the distances they're going to be doing. Their user case for it. But the point is we have the teams in house to be able to have a conversation and work all this out.
Absolutely. Cool.
The 98% uptime is a fabulous figure. Uptime is achieved through product reliability and repair and maintenance service. How extensive is your after-sales network in the UK and elsewhere to cater for that uptime promise?
So we're building this out. So we have specifically in the UK, we already have a truck as a service centre. It's based in Tottenham, so that allows us to do pretty much the whole of London at the moment. Now the reason for that is that it comes back to how quickly we're scaling up and we're rolling out. It's three and a bit years from almost kind of a concept drawing to where we are today. So we are building that out by the early part of next year. We are working with working to kind of make that a really extensive network, pan-European, because obviously we sell across all of those European countries as well. So we are growing and getting there to allow that from the early part of next year.
Super. Other manufacturers are coming to the table with their own EV solutions. They have a large network across the UK. If my driver has an issue out of hours, what is in place to deal with this potential situation? Following that, if the vehicle is deemed VOR, do you supply a replacement?
So exactly. Yeah, back to my previous answer. Yeah, so we're building that out. So that it will be that service. So wherever your driver breaks down, then we'll be able to come out and look after that vehicle. And bearing in mind that because it's got less moving parts, a lot of the time it's an easier fix. It might be a software update or an over the air fix that we can do that allows us to kind of get your driver back on the road quicker.
I suppose one of the things that you touched on was the telematics and the software that these vehicles are going to have and the data capabilities they have. We as a company will know any potential issues before the driver probably does in some instances, depending on what they are.
Took the words out of my mouth.
And I suppose as part of that task maintenance servicing offering, one of the commitments that we're looking to make to customers to really ensure that they have this confidence in utilising the vehicle is around that replacement vehicle. Should a vehicle be VOR for whatever reason, then there is a replacement one that comes in to be able to ensure the operator can facilitate their business.
Absolutely. One of so we offer different levels of maintenance to service package, and one of those has we call it Volta Mobility, and that is the ability for us to do a truck replacement. T's and C's around that, but within a really short space of time to replace that vehicle.
All about peace of mind for customers.
Absolutely.
Super. So, how do I know whether an electric truck's range is enough to cover existing operating routes?
And this is where the telematics comes into it.
Yep.
And us being the customer being able to look at that telematics data and do the analysis. Now, again, we're not the only company that does that, and depending on which telematic system people have, a lot of them already have this EV kind of reporting that sits behind it. Lost my words there. This reporting that sits behind it to help people, kind of understand whether which of their vehicles can do it. We can help that customer out.
Perfect. What about the drivers? How does Volta support drivers and bring a new generation of drivers into the industry?
So we're at that place where we're talking about a little bit like we talked earlier on. The different type of environment. So we have our driver training package that our truck as a service guys manage for us, which is talking about all of that great driver, or the way that drivers can maximize range and that side of things for it. I think the other bit is probably the great marketing stuff that we're doing at the moment around showing the inside of the truck, what it looks like, what it feels like to go forward.
I think that's really the point, isn't it, with the Volta Zero, and the fact that it really feels like we're moving bringing the future of trucking now to what it's going to look like, especially in the urban environment. Being able to have a cab that's low because there's no internal engine, being able to create a really nice environment and a stress-free environment for them to actually operate, and also making the difference that the HGVs and trucking in general is such a large case in terms of the applications that it uses. Yeah. There's the long distance up and down the motorways and having to potentially sleep in your cab and utilise the motorway service stations, but there's also the day shifts and the night shifts and the day driving that is not taking you away from home, and that's huge differences.
Yeah.
And I suppose we see the attraction to Volta Zero is because it is electric, it's new, and therefore it creates a different idea of what driving is, and making it seen as, and I said this before about the profession that it is. You know, I couldn't go and drive a HGV tomorrow as I could do with other jobs. You actually need a qualification, and therefore, and so as part of the Volta offering, we're looking at how we can do driver training to drive electric vehicles and bring people in, and really open it up to include everybody, and so that it is actually an attractive profession to get into.
Absolutely, and the technology that sits inside that truck now is pretty much state of the art.
Yeah.
You know, when we think about it, you know, the work that we're doing to have just simple things like the equivalent of Apple CarPlay and kind of Android Auto inside the vehicle. So although kind of, you know, I sit here as a 50-year-old man, but you actually sit there and go, do you know what, you know, being able to stream your kind of your music through it and that sort of stuff in the way that you want to be able to do it, it just makes it a friendlier place to be, and actually bringing it up to date, you know, and try and make it as cutting edge as we possibly can in there.
We've got another couple of minutes, so while electrification makes sense, it also needs to make business sense. Surely the costs are higher than a diesel.
And I think this is where we talked about previously that TCO model. So making sure that we're utilising all of those different elements of the TCO model to come across. So we still have, as we talked about, that additional initial cost for the truck. But thinking about all of those longer term elements, it starts to balance itself out. And when that parity hits, is so dependent on the use case, how many miles you drive, what kind of what type of environment you're driving that in, and so on and so forth. So yes, the initial capex is going to be more expensive. However, those longer term pieces, and we talked about, you know, the diesel prices exactly. Yeah, diesel prices only going one way. Energy prices should be starting to come down, you know, in not too distant a future, hopefully. So actually, that kind of that parity starts to get really close between diesel and electric.
And of course, this is only the start of the electric revolution in terms of trucks, and technology will get cheaper, but everything else will kind of also assist with that.
Absolutely. You know, probably the place we're at the moment is because we're still that startup. Then, you know, we might not be getting those kind of volume discounts and all the great stuff at the moment. So we kind of see our truck getting closer to that diesel parity, exactly the same way as we talked or mentioned earlier around cars.
Super. Well, we are coming to the end of this very first webinar in our series. If there are any questions that we haven't been able to get to, then please do go to the Volta Trucks website and put your contact details in, and a member of our team will be able to get in contact with you. And yet, this is the first of our webinar series looking at topics around driver engagement, diversity in transport, sustainability. We're going to do a piece on sustainability, and then safety in urban logistics environments. The next webinar is due to take place on the 7th of December, where we will be discussing how electrifying your fleet can bring you closer to your own sustainability goals. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for that. So from myself, thank you very much for joining. Neil, thank you very much for being on it.
Thanks for being invited, Rob.
And we hope to see you all on the 7th of December. Thank you.